Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Luna and the Druids. Normally it's Luna and the Druid, but tonight it's Luna and the Druids. My name is Jan, the Druid. There's Luna.
Hi, I'm Luna, and we are honored to have a wonderful guest tonight.
Kristoffer Hughes from Wales. The other
Hello.
Druid.
The other Druid.
The other Druid. So tonight we have the special show of Luna and the Druids. Kristoffer, we're going to dedicate the whole show to you and your work as a Druid, as a writer, and as a creator of tarot decks, or a co-creator of tarot decks. I believe you work together with artists when you create a deck. So yeah, let's just start with yourself. Many of our viewers might have heard of you or might not have heard of you. So introduce yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Kristoffer Hughes. I'm a native Welsh speaker from the island of Anglesey in North Wales. So the island of Anglesey is fairly significant, not only in my own progression on my druidic path, but also in the history of Druidry in general. The island of Anglesey was the last bastion, or the last stronghold of Druidry within the Celtic Iron Age culture. And it was such a threat to the might of Rome that they marched here from London, around 20,000 men-at-arms, it's believed, to destroy or overrun the island of Anglesey and the pesky Druids that were in control of everything. And so we have this incredible history. So the island of Anglesey has always been this vital part in the narration and the story of Druidry in the British Isles. And of course, we're still here, regardless of what the Druids suffered and what the Romans did to the Celts 2,000 years ago. We're still here. We're still a part of the story of this island and of the islands in general. So there's a very resounding, in Welsh, there's a very famous song called Rynni yma o hyd by a guy called Dafydd Iwan. And those words translate to, we are still here. We are here still. And we claim that as well from the guys of the Druids, you know?
Good. Yeah, I read it's the thing that happened with the Romans is it would be called the Druid massacre, isn't it?
Yes, very much so, and it's very viscerally described in the classical writings, but particularly by the author Tacitus, who describes this very visceral, bloody scene that happened on the Menai Straits. So the Menai Straits is the tidal channel that separates the island of Anglesey from mainland Britain. And the description is very visceral. It's very bloodthirsty. And as I guess any form of war usually is, and this was indeed a war between Rome and the inhabitants of Britain. And so these accounts, although the majority of stuff that we know about the ancient Druids come to us via the classical authors, there are a few of those classical authors that made reference to the Isle of Anglesey, not just Tacitus and the massacre of the Druids, you know. And but it's very much ingrained into the historical record of this island. It's in the very fabric of the stones itself, and the bones of our ancestors who died during that massacre, they're still here. They're here in the soil of this land, and as my ancestors, that sacrifice and that narration, that story, means something to me as a native individual of this particular island.
So heavy.
It is heavy, and that's it is incredibly heavy. But at the same time, there's a continuation that comes from that, and the Welsh bardic tradition is something that is very important to modern day Druids here in Wales, because it retains so much of the folklore, of the mythology, of the legends and the poems that have within them a mythologizing of the Druids that came before them. And that is so much a part of the narrative of modern Druidry today. So forming the Anglesey Druid Order was something that felt really important to me. So we were founded in 1999 and became active in the year 2000. So we're around, we're like 23 years old now, so we're slightly getting longer in the tooth. And yet our purpose, our function is always to be to not only to rekindle the ancient seat of learning that Anglesey seemed to have been in the past, but to also make it appropriate, apt, but also something that is necessary and a function of modern day society. So whilst we're still very much a spiritual tradition, we're a spiritual tradition that have been embraced by the local community. So, and that feels really wonderful, because we assume that in the Iron Age, the Druids were very much a part of the fabric of society and ordinary communities. And we are to this day. So we get invited to secular events and celebrations because we are a part of the history of the island, and that feels very good to be embraced and accepted by Welsh society in general,
Yeah. Well, I can confirm that from going from I'm Dutch originally, from the Netherlands, and I moved to Ireland about 8 years ago, and coming out as a Druid there, it was much more natural than it was on the continent, because that's where you have never been a part of society, and paganism and Druidry in the, well, if you call it the Celtic lands, is much more known and still known and remembered. It's in the fabric of the population. I completely agree with that. But by the way, Kristoffer, what, in your opinion, makes the order different, being an order from a regular grove? We're both members of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. We here in Ireland have the Grove of Anu. We're on the Paps of Anu. And you have named your organization an order. What's the difference?
Yes, so the way that we differentiate that is that a grove is a collection of Druids who gather to celebrate or to present workshops or to glean community or to be in community, whereas an order has a specific function in that it teaches, and that at the very foundation of an order's MO, if you like, is the capacity to teach. So from the very beginning, from the infancy of the Anglesey Druid Order, we were very much an order that sought to teach the ways of these particular lands, so that the wisdom of this land could seep into the wisdom tradition of our Druidry. So, but then at the same time, that it's not a mutually exclusive thing, because I am a Druid of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids as well. I'm a member of Andreacht Feen in the United States, and they all work wonderfully well with one another. They play well together, and yet at the same time there are distinct things that add flavor to each of those particular traditions, and our particular flavor of Druidry is very much colored by Welsh culture, Welsh history, the Welsh bardic tradition, Welsh mythology, Welsh folklore. That's the colour, and unapologetically so. We're very much a cultural expression of the Druidry that it was endemic in Welsh culture, and still to an extent is still endemic, in that we have another face of Druidry here in Wales called the Gorsedd of Bards of the islands of Britain, who preside over the ceremonies of the National Eisteddfod, and those Druids have been endemic here for centuries. And when I was very, very fortunate, it was something that I never foresaw, but last August I was initiated into that particular order at the National Eisteddfod of Wales, and became a Gorsedd Druid as well as a Pagan Druid. And that was an immensely wonderful day, and again kind of a recognition of the fact that the Druidry that I practice within the Anglesey Druid Order and personally is something that is acknowledged as being valid within the other type of Druidry that exists here, and that we come from a common place, from a common origin, and that somehow in me becoming a member of that particular order of Druids is an acknowledgement of that continuation of Druidry throughout the centuries, and it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, there were some famous people part of the Gorsedd, wasn't it?
Very famous, very famous. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, she was a member of the Gorsedd of Bards. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, is also a member of the Gorsedd of Bards, and also a whole horde of other.
Churchill.
I'm not sure whether Churchill was. I think Churchill might have been in one of the fraternal Order of Druids rather than in the Gorsedd of Bards.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
okay.
because one of the requirements for because the Queen Elizabeth, believe it or not, she had her membership of the organization revoked because she never went on to learn Welsh, and they changed the rules. I think in like the 60s, I think, that in order for you to be initiated into the Gorsedd of Bards of the islands of Britain, you have to be able to speak Welsh. And well, of course, poor Lizzie, she couldn't. So they kicked her out.
Well, she won't be too happy about that, but of course. My next question. How has Druidry evolved to fit in our modern world? For myself, we call ourselves not necessarily cultural. We're not Irish, or we can't call ourselves Irish without appropriating a culture that's not ours. So we call ourselves modern Druidry, and we are very much trying to fit in Druidic practices in the modern world. And how's your view on that?
I think primarily my view starts from a platform of Druidry is a response. It's a response to the relationship that people have with their land. But then it goes deeper, a little bit like the layers of an onion. But the more you scratch at the surface of that response, the more you find. So if it's indicative of a relationship that people have with their land, it's also indicative of the relationship that they have with its culture, with its stories, with its poetry, with its creative expression, with not only the natural world, but in how mankind has interacted with that natural world. And I've always thought that Druidry is a response to that, in that Druidry is inherently a tradition that seeks wisdom and seeks to perpetuate and disseminate that wisdom into our communities, and that the wisdom originates and comes to us from nature. And the thing that I love the most about my Druidry and Druidry in general is the meaning of the word druid, somebody who knows the oak or somebody who knows the trees. And I think there's a particular profound beauty in that simplicity, because that is so simple that the trees become our teachers, and that the wisdom tradition of Druidry is in response to a conversation between an individual and the natural world, and how that conversation then bleeds into every aspect of that individual's doing, thinking, participation in its own community. And I love how today that is still appropriate, and it's still a valid path, tradition, journey that anyone can undertake, and a journey to be in search of a wisdom that can cause you to not only be inspired, but to disseminate that inspiration around your communities. And when we have this concept in Wales of Awen or Immas in Ireland, this divine flowing breath of inspiration. And I always think that Awen, inspiration, Immas, inspiration is an infection from Druidry, and I often refer to it sometimes rather flippantly as a Druid transmitted infection is inspiration. And inspiration can lead to wisdom, but it's an infection that isn't going to kill you. It's going to bring to your life a lot of joy and wonder. And there isn't an unguent other than despair that can denigrate it.
Yeah, that's it.
I love
so I just think that Druidry is a response, and how we respond to that particular call of the wild, to the call of wisdom, is down to the flavor of each of us as individuals and our skill sets, our abilities to be able to share that. And we all do that in so many different ways. And I think that then brings so much color and accoutrement to the wildness that's within Druidry, and it's the taming of that wildness in order to perceive its wisdom that is the task or the job of the Druid, to then become that oak wise individual. And that's not to say that we're always wise, you know. I mean, sometimes I do things that are really bloody stupid, but it's the striving for wisdom, it's the attempt to try and be wise, which I think grounds me in my Druidry, and also places me on that line of continuation that stretches all the way back to the past, to the ancient Druids. And I hope that if I was to come across one of those through a time machine, that they might kind of think, oh no, they're okay, they're kind of doing something similar to what we used to do. I'm they would be proud.
And of course, that's, like you said, it comes from the old. It's integrating in the path of self-development that Druidry is, but there's also a path outwards, especially with regards to the threats that are in our society. I know a lot of Druids who are activists.
Yes.
And in various levels. I'm more or less more of showing, but there are people who are in Extinction Rebellion and stuff like that. So that's also where you can see how well Druidism or Druidry, whatever term you use, is still very relevant.
Exactly, and I think for me personally, I prefer the term Druidry rather than Druidism, simply because Druidism, it's an ism, so it's kind of like something that you think about, whereas Druidry, the re makes it a verb, it makes it something that you do. So I always consider that Druidry is something that is active, it's actively out in the world. And one of the fundamental principles within Welsh Druidry is this concept of peace, or the verb for peace, which is heddwch, hedd being the noun, heddwch being the verb. And it's the striving for peace. And when we look back into the history of our Druidic ancestors, they were politically radical. They made enormous changes in society for the betterment of society. These were people who were very active, you know, and it's not to say that everybody's going to be an activist or everyone's going to be chaining themselves to a bulldozer to stop that tree from being cut down. We all have different ways in which we can imbibe or inspire peace to be made manifest in the world, and we all have different skills and abilities and ways in which we can do that. And I think that's what defines the re of our Druidry, you know, how we integrate that wisdom into wider society. And you know, when we have members of our order who do the most incredible things, you know, either environmentally, ecologically, politically, inspirationally, to affect and inspire and seed that kernel of wisdom that the world so desperately needs right now. Because, you know, at the moment, the world is kind of like, it feels to so many people as if we're going to hell in a handcart. And that's because that wisdom has fallen out of fashion. I'm not sure what the right term is, but you know what I mean? It's as if wisdom has fallen out from our leaders, and the way in which our world is governed by those who are in charge of communities and societies. Wisdom is falling out of sync, and I think the task of the Druid is to try and imbibe that wisdom into their actions. But the world, being so vast and large as it is, can sometimes feel really overwhelming. And I think the beauty of Druidry is that it roots us into place, and that if you make a difference in your square mile, literally, and if you took that literally and figuratively, your square mile, and you inspired and imbibed wisdom and caused beautiful, needful change to happen in your square mile, you have changed the world. You've done what you can, you know, and I think that Druid transmitted infection that I spoke of earlier on is when we all focus on our square miles and create networks of inspiration and wisdom. So then that we don't feel as if we're being overwhelmed because everything else is too big.
Yeah. So be the change.
Be the change, but be the change by being the tree that Druidry has always aspired for us to be, you know, to look to the trees, and the trees will teach us how we should interact with the world.
Yeah, Kristoffer, very inspiring.
Oh, thank you. That's my job.
I love the way you bring out your enthusiasm and your passion for the path. If any of our viewers who aren't already, we have a lot of viewers from the Druid community, but also people who are interested. If you are interested, where would you start?
I'm a reader, so I've always, if I have any interest in anything, I tend to like hit the local library or hit the local, you know, booksellers online. I tend to be a reader, so my own journey into Druidry started through means of books. But of course, nowadays we've got so many resources available to us. I mean, can you imagine? You know, I'm not to make huge assumptions, but you know, you're both kind of like this, you know, almost the same generation as me. But had we have had the information that people have today back in like the 80s, it would have been revolutionary. No, we just didn't. We didn't have it. It was almost you had to go into like covert operations to try and find information. Yeah. And even the section of books that I was interested in the library would always raise an eyebrow from the librarian.
Yeah.
You want to read what? Yeah, that stuff, the good stuff in the back. But now, of course, it's just available at the touch of a fingertip.
That's it. Well, a good thing you mentioned there. I've read the book World Druidry by someone who investigated the lives of druids all around the world.
Oh, the survey, yes.
The survey, yeah.
Yes.
And there's still places in the world where people say, I can't tell it to my family members that I'm a druid.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
I live in the most conservative, one of the most conservative communities in Ireland. But even at the gas station, when I'm in the newspaper, the people from the gas station have the clippings from the papers and say, "You want enough papers again?" While they voted against abortion.
Yeah, but it is so true. There are still communities and places where you're not free to practice. You're not free to express who you are, and that's still a part of our reality.
Yeah, but it's a nice bridge to our next topic, by the way.
Oh, the Big Brown Book of Druidry.
Big Brown Book.
As people now call it.
I had the pleasure. I'm a regular contributor to Pagan Island magazine, and I had the pleasure to have an early copy.
Fabulous.
I reviewed it myself.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. Thank you.
And I read some small parts of it. Hughes, a Welsh Druid, is an esteemed author, and he weaves a tapestry of mythology, ritual, and environmental consciousness. The book is not just a read, it's an experience. An initiation into the living heart of Druidry. Each chapter serves as a stepping stone into the verdant growth of spiritual awakening, guiding the reader through the cycles of Awen, the sacred flow of inspiration.
Oh wow! Thank you.
It was
lovely.
It was a positive review, and
thank you so much.
I hope in Ireland some people will start buying it.
That would be lovely.
I've seen it in shops already, so yeah, it's kind of working. What inspired you actually to write the Book of Druidry?
It was I've written a few books now. I've written several books, and none of them have particularly focused on the Druid path. They've kind of been what I would refer to as Druid adjacent. So even though I've written books that Druids do read and Druids do use as part of their studies, like the Tale of Taliesin and Ceridwen as the goddess of the mother of Awen. So I've written books that have circumambulated the tradition, but not necessarily directly associated with it. And a few people had asked me, do you fancy writing a book that is just about Druidry, and what would that look like? And I thought about it for a number of years, and I wasn't sure whether that was something I wanted to do. But then I had a conversation with somebody from the United States at some point 2 or 3 years ago, and they said that we always need new books that tell people what Druidry is to that individual in that particular time. We always need books that introduce people to these concepts. And I thought, oh, that's actually really true, because things that I wrote 10 years ago, gosh, I want to add so much more to them now, because I've grown. You know, my experience is different as with the passing of time. So I thought, oh no, actually, yes, it is important for me to put something down. So I thought, right, let's write an introduction, with the aim, of course, that there will be a second and a third one, you know, going deeper each time. And so that's how it came about. So, and so much of it as well is, when you read modern books on spirituality, there's always a focus on exercises and meditations and visualizations and all of this stuff. But I've always been very reluctant to do that if they're not something that I haven't done myself. I need to have not only done these things, but have done them seasonedly, you know, to have done them lots of times over a number of years. So I was reluctant to just create or invent stuff for it. I wanted it to be an authentic reflection of my own practice. And I think that whenever we read a book from any author, we're not just getting information, but also a snapshot as to how that individual practices and what that practice means to that individual. And I think that can be very inspiring. So my aim was to share all of the thoughts that I have in regards to the practice of Druidry, and how and what it might have done for me, you know. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why the book is also partly a journal, because I don't know about either of you two, but I'm a butcher of books. I seriously damage my books. I'm terrible. I break their spines. I highlight in them. I write in them. They fall apart and they're held together by sellotape. I have this. To me, books are friends and companions on a journey, and I wanted this book to reflect that ideology that I have. Because I remember so I'm very fortunate in that the University of Wales at Bangor has a Welsh language library, which is to die for. It is the most beautiful library I have ever seen. It's so stunning, with plush red carpets and mahogany shelves and stained glass windows. It is just to die for. And in this library, I've come across so many books as part of my research that are full of, are you familiar with the term marginalia?
No.
Marginalia is when people write notes in the margins of books.
Ah, yeah, of course.
You know, and some of these old academic books and manuscripts, Welsh manuscripts of mythology and folklore, they're riddled with marginalia. And I've learned so much from the scribbles of these people who I will never know their names. I will never know who they were, what they were doing. And yet, through these books that they literally butchered and wrote and mutilated, I learned something of their wisdom. So I love that so much, and I wanted that to be a part of this book. So that's why I encourage people to actually write in it and write their thoughts and write their passage. So can you imagine, right? So it's saying then, 100 years time, somebody from, I don't know, Montana somewhere.
It's the brown book.
It's written in that book, and then it's found in a second-hand bookstore 100 years from now, but the person's name and life might never be recorded, but their thoughts will be there. And I think that there's a magic to that, an immortality in that expression, And of course, that's what a book does. It immortalizes something.
Yeah. Did you aim it at beginners?
Yes, I wanted to aim it very much at people who were, well, not necessarily beginners to pagan or animistic thought in general, but certainly people who were who are new to Druidry, because I think sometimes even when people are new to Druidry, there might be some misconceptions, and I wanted to address some of those, like the making of offerings, the practice of magic, the use of mythology as applicable mythology. I wanted to look at things that are very much a part of my practice, and I wanted to elaborate on how other people might be able to benefit from those.
Well, I think it's, like you say, it's good for beginners, and I really love the part that you can journal in it. You kept pages blank, or you kept question pages,
Yes.
so you can write in it, you can scribble in it as much as you like. But in all honesty, I think I'm close to 30 years in Obot now, and I still enjoyed reading it. And
thank you.
For instance, the Mabinogion I had the Mabinogion on a cassette tape. Well, that must be ages ago in my car. And I listened to the. I think there were four. There were not all of them, but 4 books of the Mabinogion were on that cassette tape. And still, I got this idea, because I haven't listened to a cassette tape in 20 years or more, and now reading about the Mabinogion, about Twig and Prederi, and in your book, it came to life to me again. So it's a great reminder, and
thank you,
especially when you've may have not worked so much in the theory, things fall off, and whoops, and you rekindle the fire again.
Thank
in some
you.
aspect. So it's I really loved it. The integration in the mythology. Were there difficult times when you wrote it?
They were what, sorry?
Did you incur any drawbacks or difficulties or
oh gosh, yes, always. I have I think it's I always have this anxiety when I write books, and primarily the anxiety comes from the fact that English is my second language. Welsh is my first language. To say that I think exclusively in Welsh is not particularly true, but I like the idea that I think predominantly in Welsh, because translation now just happens automatically. But when I'm writing, and I think that's true for most people who have learned a second language, is that the writing part is probably the one that you're the least confident in. And so I always feel as if I'm an imposter writing in a language that isn't my own. And I keep thinking that one day somebody's going to jump through the door and go, "Ha, we've caught you out. You're not English." Ooh, and then the whole world will fall apart.
I'd said, Kristoffer, get over yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I keep telling myself, no, get over it. I can write in English, but it'll always be there, and I think it will always be there just because of an inherent anxiety. So I always have these anxieties, and I have to deal with those with every single book that I write. But I managed to get over them; otherwise, the books would never happen.
That's it. You need to.
But there are always tricky parts to any book. But I think I'm very lucky. I live some of the themes that you just mentioned from my book. I live within that mythological landscape, and sometimes I find that I struggle with something, and that the answer is sometimes really obvious. Like, well, go and ask that archetype or deity or spirit, because you live here. They're down the road. Just go and speak to them. Oh yeah, of course.
You can speak to them.
I can speak to them, or go and sit on a rock, and look out over the place where Branwen, saw Matholwch coming from Ireland, and it's just all here. So I do have times where I think it's true of any writer. You get all up in your head, and then it's very difficult to get out of your head. But I've spoken to so many authors, and it happens to all of them, because none of us are perfect. We're just strange people who like to be cooped up in a room all alone for months on end writing. It's not that glamorous.
It's not at all. And in all honesty, the way languages in general are taught in schools, primary and secondary schools at the moment. If you look what happens on social media, I think our generation still does pretty well, even in our second language.
Exactly, and I'm learning a third language.
We're very. Tell me.
Yeah, I'm learning Finnish.
Finnish.
Yes.
Terve. And perkele.
Kiitos.
Kiitos. Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah, so I'm learning Finnish.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Well, I've worked in Helsinki
You did.
for a year or
Fantastic.
something. Yeah. So I still, and it's long ago, but it's there's still some Finnish here, especially the bad words, of course.
No, we won't go there.
Yeah, we'll go there. Yeah. To finish up, what are your favorite sections of this book?
Oh my word! Oh my gosh! That's a really difficult question to answer.
Shall I ask you? Shall I give you a hint? What I liked?
Okay. Oh yes, do.
The chapter on magic.
Oh, see, yeah. So I would agree with you.
I guess you say that for anything I said. No, but it's a brilliant chapter. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very proud of that particular chapter, because it's something that is not that often addressed in modern Druidry, and whereas in the Welsh mythological sagas, in Welsh folklore, magic is so inherent. It's that again is endemic in my culture, and I wanted to try and explain it in a way that would make sense to people. So thank you for saying that. That means a lot.
Well, to finish up, I walked into my library this morning. I said, I know this title. I found an old book there, and as you can see, it's from. I bought it in Glastonbury.
The Speaking Tree.
In the Speaking Tree for £5.
I recognise the stickers.
So do I.
It's the old Book of Druidry by Ross Nichols, and I would. Although it's a very interesting book if you're really going down the rabbit hole, but for anyone aspiring to set their steps on Druidry, I advise.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it is peculiar, and it's unfortunate because Ross Nichols' Book of Druidry is no longer in print.
No,
you can only get secondhand copies of it now, and also when it comes to so there's a peculiarity in that titles are not necessarily subject to copyright. Contents of books are, but not titles as such. Yeah. And my publishers, Llewellyn Worldwide, they will always ask their authors, what would you like this book to be called, but ultimately the decision for the final title of the book is Llewellyn Worldwide's decision, and I did think initially, they've called it the Book of Druidry, and I thought, well, no, it is a Book of Druidry, and there are other books of Druidry out there.
Yeah.
And recently, Maria wrote. I can't think of her surname now. Do you know Maria? She used to be Philip Cargom's secretary. And I can't think of her surname. She just wrote a book in the summer, and it's called The Element Book of Druidry. So it's still called a Book of Druidry.
Yeah.
And then we have small. Yeah, it's a little tiny book, hardback. It's beautiful, and even though it's aimed at people who know nothing about Druidry, I learned something just from reading that. Yeah,
and we have, of course, more books like the Book of Hedge Druidry by Joanna.
Book of Hedge Druidry, yeah. So there's
there's more.
Yeah, there's more of them, So they're but it's it's a funny thing. Writing books is a funny business.
That's it. Well, let's leave it with the books here. I suggest if you want it, there's some websites rolling down the screen now: llewellyn.com and amazon.co.uk, where you can order the book, or maybe preferably order it at your local bookstore. So your local bookstore has some business as well.
Yes, indeed.
That's it. I'm going to give the gavel now to my partner in crime, Luna.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Kristoffer.
And he's going to pick your brain about something completely different.
Yay!
Well, Kristoffer wrote books, yes, but he also created a couple of tarot decks, and I would love to talk about that. For me personally, the most delicious one is the Winter Tarot.
I love it.
So exactly, the Yuletide. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it properly. Please tell me, Kristoffer, what inspired you to create a deck honoring the period of winter?
There was, I love the midwinter season in particular, but I've also always considered that so much of the iconography, so much of the symbolism of midwinter, not only archetypically, but also in the way that we as human beings connect to that season, is literally like the story of tarot. There's so much rich, a wealth of symbolism. And I thought for a number of years, gosh, I could utilize so many of those symbols and apply them to my knowledge and use of tarot. And I think it was a good 4 or 5 years ago, I bought the Christmas tarot from a shop in London. And I was very excited. The box looked very Dickensian. And on the train coming home, I was really disappointed. It only contained a major arcana. There was no minor arcana. And the images were interesting. They were fairly interesting, but they didn't portray a nostalgia that I think so many people feel towards the midwinter season as well. That sense of nostalgia, very much a Six of Cups feeling, to the midwinter season in itself. So I wanted to address that, and I was speaking to my tarot editor at Llewellyn, and she said, "Oh, have you bought any decks recently?" Because I like to buy tarot decks. And so I went off on a bit of a rant about this Christmas tarot and how I personally, that's not to say that other people don't like it, but I personally didn't connect with it. And she said, "Well, do you think you can do better?" And I said, "Yes, I bloody do." She said, "Well, put your money where your mouth is then." And I thought, oh, God, so I walked straight into that one.
Oops.
But then I got really excited. I thought, oh, gosh, I get to create a brand new deck that focuses on a season that I really, really enjoy and love, and focuses on, all of the aspects of it: solstice, Saturnalia, Christmas, Yuletide, New Year, and all the things in between. Because they're all there, they're all bundled into this Yuletide season. And so I got to explore not only something that I love, tarot. I love tarot. I'm a complete tarot nerd. But I also love the midwinter season. So to be able to work with that, and then to design all of the cards, and then to work with an artist to bring my vision to life was just fabulous. And Erin O'Leary Brown, who illustrated it, she's an American artist, and my editor and I, we trawled the internet for examples of artistic pieces of work that would have been suitable. And then we eventually came across Erin, and I wanted something that was not only nostalgic but was reminiscent of a children's illustrated book, but that also had a feel of things like the London Illustrated News from the 1800s that first illustrated Queen Victoria and Prince Albert standing by the Christmas tree. And that was the first time we saw a Christmas tree publicly expressed in the British Isles. And the tree is this one. This tree, the style of tree is mimicking what was in the London Illustrated News in, I think, 1860, I think. So I got to play with all of those. And Erin, who had no knowledge whatsoever that this world even existed, she hadn't got a clue. Suddenly she had a master's course, in tarot, and she just absolutely loved the whole journey. And that brought to me so much joy as well to be able to share something. And to anybody who loves tarot, we don't need much of an opportunity to have a chance to talk about it. And I got to just blab about tarot with Erin for 2.5 years. and she really enjoyed the journey, and it was so fabulous and magical. I loved every minute of creating this deck, and I haven't put this deck down since July because it came out. I got my copies in July, and I have not put it down since, and I'm reluctant. It's Old New Year here in Wales on Saturday, the 14th of January. So our festive season doesn't technically finish until the 13th of January, where we have a huge event on Saturday night in the town of Beaumaris with our Mari Lwyd, who is my high priestess in the Yuletide Tarot. She's a Welsh folkloric figure, a dead horse that comes to life, you know, and causes mischief about the town. So I'll still be using this deck until the 13th of January.
That's fabulous. I saw those images, and they really remind me of that beautiful story, like a bedtime story, as well as a little bit of Alice in the Wonderland. So
Yes.
like I got into the rabbit hole immediately with that deck. Beautiful and fabulous work. And when we started to talk today, you said that for Druids, the inspiration comes from nature. And I could tell that that's exactly where the inspiration came from, when you were creating this deck as well, the imagery of the nature. It's so subtle and so gorgeous. So
Thank you.
Fabulous deck. But you mentioned, you're welcome. You mentioned the work with the artist, and that's what I would like to ask you about, because to me, it's fascinating how to put your vision into a deck of cards. And specifically, I mean here the Celtic Tarot deck, which you created as well. The one which the main theme is the Welsh mythology. Fabulous and beautiful deck. So please tell me how it was for you to create that deck. What inspired you to have this idea first?
It's with the Celtic Tarot, it was something that I really wanted to explore through the storehouse of images that the tarot is. The tarot was my introduction to the world of spirituality, or the potential of spirituality, even though I was aware, being a little Welsh boy here in North Wales, I was aware of Druids, but they were always like the fairly intimidating, scary older people who hung around at the Eisteddfod. So I didn't really have a sense of, you know, a spirituality that came with that. But then I came across the tarot, and it opened this door onto a whole other world. And I was hooked from 13 years old, completely hooked on tarot. And all through my adult life, I had always thought of, there must be a way in which, because eventually I became a Druid and I started studying Druidry, and I wanted to somehow incorporate that love into my other greatest love, which was tarot. And I thought, no, I can do it. I can incorporate element. I mean, it's almost an impossible task anyway, because how on earth do you choose what goes into it from a pool of not hundreds, but thousands of archetypal symbolisms and deities and spirits? There's literally thousands. So it's very much an edited version of what is in the pool of Celtic wisdom. And of course it had to be, because it's limited to 78 cards. But getting to the point of limiting it to 78 symbols and pictorial representations was a real adventure. It was, so this one took us 3 years to create this one with Chris Down. So Chris Down is an English artist who lives not far from Stonehenge. He lives just down the road from Stonehenge. So he already had an idea of the images that I wanted to create on the background to them, but again, he had no experience of tarot. So whilst he was familiar with Celtic mythology, he wasn't familiar with tarot mythology. So he himself also had this amazing 3-year immersive course in tarot, which he absolutely loved. But the tricky thing was so I visualize all of the cards, I draw them. I'm not the best illustrator at all, but I still draw them as best as I can and describe what the colors need to be. And then that gets sent to the artist, and then the artist somehow has to interpret that. And that's very difficult, I think, especially for an artist who is used to doing things from their own backs. You know, they're used to creating things from their own imagination. And it's a very difficult job, I think, when they have to recreate what's in my head. And but that process was fabulously enlightening. For instance, in the Yuletide tarot, for my chariot, I was thinking a little bit too highbrow. I was going all very, very mythological, and I wanted to have Freya in her chariot pulled by cats with the glow of the sun behind her. And for some reason, it just wasn't working. And then the artist, Erin, she said, in her mind, it made sense. She said, shouldn't it be Santa Claus in his sleigh being pulled by a reindeer? And I'm like, of course it should be. You know, of course it should. As there's me trying to be all, you know, ooh, 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 you know, all up in with the mythology. And Erin is like, shouldn't it just be this? So there was these fabulous examples of how that collaboration works. And the interesting thing with the Celtic Tarot is we had 9 cards that were problematic. And we struggled with these 9 cards. So we would like, oh God, we'll have to redo this one, rethink this one, and tweak it and tweak it. And I'd made a note in my journal of all of the times that we had a problem with cards, and it was 9 cards. But the interesting thing was that when the deck came out, I discovered that those 9 cards formed a reading. And it was an amazing reading. It was literally a snapshot of Chris Downs' life and my life during that 3-year period. It applied to both of us in a profoundly personal way. And it's like, oh my word, this is a reading. And it's like, well, of course it would be a reading. Why would it not be a reading? Because we're working with these mystical forces that underlie that tree of tarot. And it was speaking to us. And so the whole process was fabulous and just magical. I loved every minute of it.
That's always fascinating to me, how artist works with the creator of the deck itself. And what's very interesting is that you introduce the world of tarot to those people, to those artists.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the results are just stunning. I wouldn't notice that the artist didn't knew the depth of the tarot. So well done as a teacher of tarot.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful. Go ahead, sorry.
It was so the 3rd deck that doesn't come out until April. That was a different experience again, because Nadia Turner, who did the illustrations for that tarot, she is familiar with the tarot, and she's created tarot and oracle decks in the past. So that was a different experience again. It was equally as magical and wonderful, but it was a different process because of her understanding of the tarot. So I've enjoyed every single deck for different reasons, and which has just added to the magic of creating something and putting it out in the world.
Yeah. Well, in all honesty, if you look at the greatest of the greatest tarot decks, the Rider-Waite and my favorite deck, the Crowley's Thoth deck, they're both created in similar ways with an inspirator and an artist.
Yes. Oh gosh, yes.
And they became the biggest decks in history, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's still, you know, and even though I've got tarot decks under my own name and under my own designs, I still love the Rider-Waite Smith, and I constantly buy new tarot decks, but it's the Rider-Waite Smith that is my ultimate favorite, you know, still, because I think that was my first deck. That was the one that I found as a 13-year-old boy. So it's the one that will constantly, I think, sing to my spirit, you know.
Well, I the fun thing with me is that I have struggled for years with the Rider-Waite Smith. And then I got my hands on the Thoth deck.
You got the Thoth deck, yeah. I love the Thoth deck.
Boom! I was hooked. and all of a sudden, like maybe it was the preparation with the Rider-Waite Smith, but all of a sudden, when I had the Thoth deck, when I had the pips in the beginning with the keywords, I now have them clipped, all my cards. But Yeah, the keywords had to go. They're too limiting.
But yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And but it got me going immediately. So it's an experience for all of us. Like
It is.
yourself, Luna, you have your favorite decks as well, probably.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all have that one particular one which will always be within our hearts. And
Yes.
I think and I feel that one of those decks which will become very close to my heart is the one you're creating, or you've probably created already, the Bee Tarot you mentioned, Kristoffer,
Yes.
a couple of minutes ago, the one which will be published in April. And the reason I say this is because this deck is inspired by the bees.
Yes.
I love the bees. For me, the bees are the essence of our lives, because without the bees, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have food. So for me, I see it as a very activist way of promoting the wellness and the beingness of a bee.
Yes.
So to speak. But I'm curious, what inspired you to create the deck inspired by the bees?
So we keep bees here at home. So well, I say we like the royal we. My husband keeps bees, so I'm the beekeeper's husband.
Me too. Actually.
But bees have always been a part of our lives for the last 23 years, and not only are they a part of our lives, they also connect us to the story of the land that's around us, and to this wisdom. And of course, you can apply that wisdom then to, or make similarities between the wisdom of the bees and the wisdom of spirituality, the wisdom of tarot, of druidry. That wisdom is in the land, and the bees are directly connected to it. And having learned about the bees and watched them and been nurtured by them, again, very similar to the way in which I created the Yuletide Tarot, all of these symbols were flowing into my imagination. And I thought, oh my word, not only could I create a tarot deck, but I could also create a tarot deck with a message that we need the bees. And that message is very much fundamental to, the book that accompanies the deck. And also Llewellyn Worldwide will be given a percentage of the profits from the bee tarot to bee charities around the world, so that we benefit. That there are various charities like Bees for Development that cause people to become beekeepers for development in third world countries or in impoverished communities. And the bees have a really important message to tell us, but they also do it in they communicate with each other in the darkness of a hive. There's no light in there. They have all of their visual senses switched off when they go into the hive, and they function by means of other data input. And I thought, gosh, the way that the bees behave in the hive is occult. It is hidden. It is out of sight. There is no sight, but yet there's this world of feeling. And that's exactly what the tarot is. The tarot is an occult tool. It reveals to us that which is hidden and brings to light that which is hidden or out of sight. So I could make all of these parallels between the tarot, spirituality, ecology, environmentalism, bees, pollination, flowers, the passage of the sun and the moon, because they're so connected to all of those natural cycles and forces. And the relationship between humanity and the bees is absolutely fascinating. For millennia, we've had this profound relationship with the bees. And so much of it is imbibed. Greek mythology is full of these myths and stories that relates to bees. And you find these tales in almost every culture on Earth of the bees almost being a bridge between humankind and the natural world. And we've relied upon them, and we are utterly reliant upon them. Without the bees, we die. We don't survive without them. These tiny little insects that the majority of the world's population are barely aware of, or they just think are pests when they come buzzing too close. And yet our survival, our wellness is entirely connected with that particular queendom. You know?
Yeah. I can't wait to have this deck and to be on my shelf.
Oh yes, yeah. I can't wait to see it. I'm so looking forward to seeing it. So I should be getting early copies in March, my author copies. So I can't wait now that the new year is here. It feels a little bit closer.
Yeah. And for the general audience, it comes out in April, isn't it?
Yes. So it's released in April, and it's released in the United States first.
Okay.
So usually it's available a few weeks later around the world.
Okay. Well, looking forward to that.
Yes, I can't wait. Can't wait to see it.
So, Kristoffer, we're already talking for an hour. I think we could easily.
Oh my gosh,
do
we are. Oh my word.
We could easily do another one. Well, let's agree that we'll invite you later down the line when the next project is on again, and we'll talk about and showing the B tarot, or maybe do some reading with it for.
Yes, that'd be exciting.
That would be exciting.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Yes, I'd love to.
Yeah. So what I'll do, I'll bring up a preview of the B tarot as a parting screen, and looking forward to see you again, either online or at one at the next gatherings in Glastonbury. Or
yes, I'll be there in June.
You'll be there in June. Well,
is that winter solstice by any chance?
No, early June.
Early June, yeah. First weekend of June.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Obot gathering, and I forget what I wanted to say.
Christopher,
we'll meet each other there, either there or what I wanted to say. I think Anglesey is also a very nice place to visit. And
yes, do come and visit and participate in the ancient Druid ritual of afternoon tea. It usually involves gin.
Oh, that's the best tea ever. We'll keep you to that. An afternoon tea with gin, Kristoffer. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Luna. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure to talk to you both. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Kristoffer, for your time and your wonderful, beautiful energy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a joy. And a joy to speak to another tarot aficionado. I'm lustfully looking at your shelf full of tarot decks. I'm like, I only wish I could read all the titles.
Well, it's only around 20-something tarot. The rest is oracle decks. So it's not just all tarot. But it's a pretty big collection. A
smorgasbord of oracle and divination and tarot. I love it.
Oh well, we all have our weak spots.
That's not a weak spot. I have the same weak spot. So let's consider it a strength.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Look at the strength this shelf has to have to hold that.
The amount of wisdom it has ready to offer at any given time.
What is actually really funny, just by looking at your Celtic Tarot, Kristoffer, I realized that this dragon here, I'm not sure if I can move that far, but it's actually a Welsh dragon.
It's a little Welsh dragon.
Yeah, it is. I realized that only studying your deck today, so thank you for that discussion. That's the part of my altar. I love dragons.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for a wonderful conversation.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome anytime.